This first video has nothing to see, only darkness. Put the phone down, take a seat. If you're in a rush, wait until you're in bed, and listen. This story really happened.
On September 10, 1971, in London, a young Englishman named Robert Rowland went down to his basement around 1 in the morning, just as he did every night. He switched on his radio set and began trawling the airwaves, hunting for police frequencies or any stray wireless chatter he could eavesdrop on. It was his nightly ritual: listen to the police, catch wind of a crime before anyone else, then slip the tip to a journalist he knew, for a fee. But that night, Robert hit a frequency that froze the blood in his veins. Instead of listening in on the police, he had accidentally tuned into a conversation between two thieves. From their clipped, urgent exchange, he realized a massive bank job was underway nearby. His instincts flipped. He grabbed the phone, dialed the police, and reported exactly what he was hearing. Within 2 hours, the city was on high alert. Officers fanned out and searched more than 750 banks, sweeping through nearly every district. Nothing. Nothing. No broken locks. No suspicious vans lingering in alleys. No alarms. They called Robert back and asked if he was sure. He was. The operation was still going, he said. The thieves were still talking on the air. The police pushed on and finally reached the bank being robbed. From the outside, it looked perfectly normal. Inside, though, the gang was already moving the loot. For reasons that would baffle London for decades, the officers left without making an arrest. The thieves carried on, calm and methodical, and by the time dawn brushed the rooftops, the robbery had succeeded. London woke the next morning to a bank heist unlike anything in memory. The story rocketed across front pages worldwide. And then, just 3 days later, every domestic paper that covered it was quietly pulled from circulation. A blackout. This, it seemed, was bigger than a simple burglary. The value of the haul was said to exceed $50 million, and people began to whisper that the culprits were no ordinary criminals. Among the stolen items, rumor insisted, was something worth more than the British royal crown itself. They called it the Lloyds Bank robbery, an audacious crime stitched together with planning, nerve, and riddles that to this day leave investigators staring into a maze without an exit. And in a strange way, its spiritual blueprint could be traced back to the mind of Sherlock Holmes. That same year in London lived a poor man named Anthony Gavin, 38 years old, a former thief and underground martial arts brawler who had turned his back on crime and tried to live simply. He scraped by as a roving photographer, lingering in parks and gardens where people might ask for portraits. Some days, no one did. To pass the empty hours, Anthony read. He devoured novels, especially the Sherlock Holmes stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. Puzzles hooked him, crosswords, mystery magazines, detective tales. He loved them all. But one story burned brighter than the rest, The Red-Headed League, in which a bank robbery is uncovered almost by accident. Anthony became convinced that such a plan could only be unmasked by someone with Holmes's genius. In the real world, he thought, if a person executed that scheme with care, it would work. Why not me? He began assembling what he needed. First, a partner, someone to help from the first whisper of planning through recruiting the crew, gathering tools, and carrying out the job. For 2 months, he searched. He drifted through pubs, asked around the seedier corners where certain trades changed hands, and listened for a name with experience and nerve. Nothing. He told himself to be patient. The right man would surface. A few days later, Anthony stopped by the shop of a friend, Reg Tucker, who sold used cars. Before going straight, Reg had been rough around the edges, someone with a taste for risky choices, and a temperament that matched Anthony's own. Reg was in a foul mood, lamenting how badly things were going. In the middle of his grumbling, he blurted, "If I ever got the chance to rob a bank, I wouldn't say no." The words struck Anthony like a live wire. Here was a man desperate enough to listen. He laid out the idea. He had a plan, foolproof, he said, and he wanted Reg as his partner. They argued and probed the edges for hours, testing each seam. By the end, the two men shook on it. Anthony and Tucker both had messy pasts, petty theft, using and dealing illegal substances, and a long list of other dubious deeds. They even fought in secret wrestling tournaments where anything you could hold in your hand counted as a weapon. In short, they were no strangers to the dark side. Yet, by a twist of luck, neither of them had ever been arrested. On paper, their records were spotless. Their agreement at first was only about the idea. The details were fog. 2 days later, Tucker rang Anthony. "When do we do this?" he asked, imagining a quick armed robbery or something small and sharp-edged. Anthony's answer blindsided him. He laid out a set of conditions so exacting it sounded like a riddle with no solution. "A bank like that doesn't exist, Tucker." But Anthony refused to bend. He spread out a map of London and began combing through it, patient and relentless, looking for a bank that fit his blueprint. The requirements were simple to say and nearly impossible to find. First condition: the bank had to have safe deposit boxes, an underground vault, rows upon rows of drawers that clients could rent to stash their most precious things. Not just money, often wills, rare manuscripts, heirloom jewelry, even historical artifacts. The beauty of such contents, Anthony reasoned, was that they were unknown to bank staff. No serial numbers, nothing traceable. Once taken, they would vanish into the fog. Second condition: the bank needed a neighboring property available for rent. They would lease that shop and dig a tunnel from beneath it straight to the vault. Finding both conditions in one neat package, it sounded laughable. If they did manage to dig, how would they avoid attention? Where would the mountain of soil go? The vault would be armored. How would they breach it? And even nearing a reinforced room would trigger alarms, wouldn't it? Anthony kept searching. A week drifted by, then another. He disappeared for a month and a half, haunting streets and records, tracing lines with a pencil like a cartographer at war. At last, he returned to Tucker with a glint in his eyes. "I found it. Lloyds Bank, Baker Street, London." It had safe deposit boxes, he was sure of that, though he didn't yet know exactly where the vault sat inside the building. Better still, 2 doors down from the bank, there was an old shoe shop for rent. The gap between them was just 12 meters. "What about everything else?" Tucker pressed. "First, we take the shop. After that, everything gets easier." Convincing Tucker took hours. They needed £10,000 just to secure the lease, money Anthony didn't have. Tucker balked. Why throw that kind of fortune into a hole in the ground? But after a long, grinding debate, he agreed on one hard condition. If they ran into any serious obstacle, they would scrap the plan and Tucker would keep the premises for himself to run a legitimate business. Anthony accepted without blinking. He believed the plan couldn't fail. After all, it had worked before, at least in fiction. At this point, a new player stepped onto the board. Benjamin Wolfe, 64, a friend of Tucker's. His role was to rent the shop under his own name in exchange for a slice of the take. He too set a line in the sand. If trouble surfaced, he would walk away. No hard feelings. Then came a stroke of luck. Beneath the shop was a basement. They could dig below ground, hidden from the street, and store the excavated soil downstairs. No sacks carried out to waiting vans, no curious glances from neighbors. Silent progress. They moved to phase 2. Benjamin opened the shop and dressed it up as a used car dealership. Tucker joined him as a partner, setting a desk inside and hanging a proper sign on the door. It was all very ordinary, which was exactly the point. With a public-facing business on the block, it became simple to open an account at the bank next door. Anthony told Tucker to buy fine clothes and walk into Lloyd's like a man who belonged. After another long argument, Tucker relented. He spent £500 on a wardrobe and deposited another £500 to open the account. Day after day, he visited the bank, each time with a different pretext, just enough to become a familiar face, the kind of client staff nod to without thinking. What Tucker didn't know, until he stepped behind those doors, was how meticulous Lloyds had become about protecting client data. Their security protocols were exacting, so strict that even entering the building as a customer felt like stepping onto a quiet, polished stage where every move was noticed. No one at the bank needed to know Tucker's real name. Anthony told him, "Pick an alias. They won't dig too hard." Banks were struggling, the economy wobbled, and fewer questions got asked.
Tucker slipped into that gap, soon a familiar face under a borrowed name, and no one looked twice. 3 months later, Anthony pushed the plan forward. Tucker needed to rent a safe deposit box. The goal wasn't the contents, it was access. He had to get inside the vault room, measure it, and map it in his head. Tucker rented a box and began his ritual. Every week, he went in with an umbrella, a sheet of paper, and a pencil. The umbrella measured 66 centimeters, his discreet yardstick. Each visit played the same way. Guards waited outside for privacy and locked the door behind him. Alone, Tucker paced and measured, counting umbrella lengths, sketching angles, memorizing furniture. He learned the vault room by heart, its depth relative to the shop's basement, how sound carried, the contours of walls and cabinets. He identified the best breach point. The walls behind the deposit boxes were reinforced steel, but one wall, supporting a bank of furniture, was weaker. When they compared depths, they found the vault sat only 1.5 meters deeper than their basement. Perfect. Mark the tunnel's start, mark the surface point. Shortest path, least effort. Anthony set excavation in motion and brought in a new hand, Tom Stevens, a classic car man with a clean record. Tom bought digging tools from different shops to avoid a pattern and ferried them into the basement. The crew rounded out with Bobby Mills, oversight. That made 5. Anthony, Tucker, Benjamin Wolfe, the leaseholder, Tom with the tools, and Bobby on oversight. 2 more joined later, kept off the books. 7 in all. By June, Tucker could have walked the vault room blindfolded. Anthony had a drilled team, each person clear on their task. Every Saturday night they gathered after dark and dug until dawn. 5 of them, Anthony and Tucker among them, worked the tunnel. Meanwhile, Tucker kept up appearances at the bank, weekly visits, small talk, harmless questions, fishing for any hint of suspicion. Nothing surfaced. The tunnel crept forward, true to its line, angling toward the vault. Only one riddle remained unsolved: the alarm system. Whenever the crew pressed him, Anthony waved it off. "First we guarantee the tunnel. Once we're close, I'll deal with the alarm, one problem at a time." While they dug below, Wolfe sat in the office, cigarette in hand, ears tuned to the street through the closed shop door. Tom kept watch from a rooftop across the way, eyes scanning the block. One night, Tom spotted 2 young men stop in the road. "Hear that?" one said. "It sounds like hammering inside that shop." They drifted toward the premises, wedged between the gang storefront and the bank. One pressed an ear to the door. "There are people in there," he whispered. Tom's thumb hovered over his radio. If he warned the team, the crackle might carry. Instead, he sprinted down the fire escape and strolled up as if he belonged. "I'm security here," he said, as though scolding nosy kids. "Why are you hanging about?" "We heard voices," one said, "and metal, like someone's working." Tom smiled. "The owner never turns off the radio even when he's out. That's what you're hearing." The boys laughed, shrugged, and wandered off. Crisis evaporated. Before Tom could slip back, 2 figures emerged from the bank. Night guards. His heart clenched. One guard stepped over, not to question him, but to ask him for a light. Tom flicked his lighter. Just like that, the moment passed. You might wonder why the guards didn't hear the digging. Hold that thought. There's an answer. For 3 months, the tunnel grew, steady, careful, until they were 1 meter from the vault wall. And then, 2 miracles, the kind no rational mind expects. The first miracle arrived a few days before the tunnel broke through. 2 new men joined the crew, one an explosive specialist, the other an alarmed systems expert, and they came in by pure accident. Anthony had wandered into a pub and drunk too much. Loosened by liquor, he leaned toward the man beside him and, piece by piece, spilled the entire plan. Outside, the stranger sobered him with a smile. "I'm ready to join you. If you refuse,
I go to the police and tell them everything you just told me." At first, Anthony thought the man was bluffing, fishing for details. He tested him. "All right then, what do you know?" The stranger recounted the plan, step by step, in painful detail. Anthony had given away the whole store. He had no choice but to bring him in. The man added a condition. He wouldn't come alone. He had a friend, a demolitions expert, tailor-made for work like this. The crew, improbably, fell into place like pieces in a heist film. The second miracle unfolded in the street. A sewer line across from the bank failed, and the city began digging. Every time the work crew fired up their equipment, the bank's alarm tripped, more than 10 times. Exasperated, the bank shut the alarm off temporarily until the repairs were finished. Tucker learned it from chatty acquaintances at the counters. Small talk that suddenly tasted like champagne. A rental shop with a hidden cellar. A vault positioned just so. A demolitions man. An alarm expert. And now the alarms silenced by civic misfortune. The odds leaned their way. With that news, the team pushed to the vault wall. "Let's get to the bricks," Anthony said. "Nothing left to fear." They finished the tunnel and prepared for the job on Sunday evening, September 10th, 1971. They slipped into the shop Saturday night and slept there, waiting out the day. The soil from their dig weighed more than 8 tons, all of it piled in the basement. The space was so tight, only a few could work at once. The new demolitions man took the lead inside the tunnel, wiring the vault wall with small, careful charges, never enough to shatter, just enough to nibble. He set off each pop during daylight, hiding the sound inside traffic and clatter. At 9 that night, he shook his head. "No more blasts. It's quiet now. You'll have to finish it by hand." They set to work with chisels and bars. Hours dragged. Stone groaned. Dust turned their throats to chalk. Near 2 in the morning, the wall gave way. They slipped through into the safe deposit room. At that very moment, the police entered the bank. Robert, the night owl with the radio, had tuned into the chatter between Anthony and Tom on the rooftop. He heard, "We're nearly in," and "We've reached the big cakes," their code for the deposit drawers. Robert didn't know the exact bank. He only knew a robbery was unfolding somewhere. The police swept a 10-mile radius from Robert's home, checking bank after bank, 750 in all. By the time they reached number 500, every door was shut, every lobby quiet, the city perfectly calm. They called Robert again. He confirmed the thieves were still talking. "Stay on the line," they told him. "If we hit the right place, they'll warn each other. We'll hear it." 2 more miracles favored the thieves. First, when the police finally stepped into the correct branch, the gang was already inside the safe deposit room, a thick, insulated chamber. The officers stood upstairs in a silent bank, while below, metal whispered and hands worked. Second, Tom, watching from the rooftop across the way, saw the police arrive and panicked. He hurled his radio and bolted. He never warned the crew.
Ironic. Understated. The tossed radio was cheap, but that panicked move helped them more than Tom could have guessed. Without his device, Robert, and the officers listening through him, never heard a warning that the police had chosen the right bank. So, the work rolled on like a well-oiled machine. The officers came and went upstairs, while Anthony's crew looted in silence below, none the wiser. In 3 hours, the safe deposit room was stripped. They cleared out 27 boxes. At first light, they vanished.
The next morning, when the staff began their shift, they walked into a nightmare. The vault looked ravaged. The tunnel's mouth yawned like a wound, pointing straight back toward the rented shop. The method was obvious, and so, unfortunately, was the name on the lease, Benjamin Wolfe. The story erupted in the press. The bank's early estimate put the haul at more than $52 million, while admitting many stolen items could not be itemized. Within 4 days, police arrested Wolfe, and under questioning, he confessed. A week later, they picked up 4 more: Tucker, Tom Stevens, the demolitions man, and the alarm specialist. Before long, most of the remaining crew were in custody, except for 3 ghosts: Anthony, the mastermind, and the 2 unidentified men no one could trace. What happened next only deepened the fog. First, the search pattern. When Robert first called, an officer asked what kind of set he was using. By their own calculations, the thieves' radio could be picked up from roughly a mile away, not 10. Yet the police swept a 10-mile radius and took their time entering banks. In reality, Robert's receiver was about 300 meters from the target branch. Second, the sweep itself felt cursory, more for show than for certainty. Third, the coincidences strained belief. What were the odds that, by chance, a perfect team would assemble: tunnelers, a veteran car thief, a watchman, a demolitions expert, and an alarm technician, and that a 16-meter tunnel could be dug night after night undetected? Fourth, why were only 3 people never found? The architect of the plan and the 2 men even their partners couldn't name. Fifth, why did the authorities pull newspapers from the streets, and why did the government compensate the bank? That's where the most persistent rumor takes hold. Whispers said that among those boxes were compromising photographs of Princess Margaret, along with sensitive files implicating members of the royal family and several ministers. Multiple foreign official sources later claimed Anthony himself was tied to British intelligence, and the 2 unknowns were high-ranking officers. Afterward, the government tightened press controls and discouraged further reporting on the robbery. In the end, 6 of the 9 were caught, yet only about a quarter of the loot was ever recovered. Among the items returned were documents the government sealed in the National Archives as state secrets, scheduled by law for release in 2071, a full century after the heist. One final detail keeps the rumor alive. The 100-year disclosure rule is often applied to documents connected to the royal household, which suggests to some that this wasn't merely a robbery for profit, but an operation with a different objective and protection from very high places. Maybe it was a cleanly executed bank job that lucked into perfect timing. Or maybe it was a carefully staged retrieval dressed up as a crime. To this day, no one can say for sure. The tunnel is long collapsed, the vault repaired, and the truth remains somewhere underground.